So I imagine people are getting hungry, but I'm sure the mind is a bit hungrier than the stomach. We're not even close to Valley Forge yet. So I think we should take a few minutes. We are going to have Hal Cooper, one of the leading engineers on major infrastructure projects, is going to participate in the afternoon panel because we had the pleasure of having Lyndon speak this morning. So what I'd like to do now is open it up for questions regarding this morning discussion. And if so, people have some relevant questions, prerogatives, to come up to the microphone here in the center aisle. Please give us your name, where you're from. We've got people participating from all over the country. We have people here from Denmark, from Germany, of course, Australia. So please, go ahead.
Hello. My name is Ann Reynolds, and I'm from Nevada. I was raised on a dairy farm in Fallon, and that farm is in a community where the farmland is disappearing because it's been swapped with land in Las Vegas. And the Bureau of Land Management land in Las Vegas is now houses, and then the farmland is a wildlife refuge, and so a lot of those farms are reverting to desert. What is the agenda for talking with people? I know we've talked to a lot of the farmers that I knew in high school, and what is the agenda for Nevada, or where would we start to develop that in terms of talking to people with the farm bureaus? I mean, I know there's been work done. It's just, what's the development schedule for increasing that so that we can increase the political awareness of what farmers have to be in terms of political spokesmen?
Well, I'd probably hand that off to Marcia if she wants to say something, or Frank. But clearly, I think that's part of what we're doing here, too. We've got to consolidate that very specific picture. Great. So either, would Frank, you'd like to say something, or Marcia?
Let me say this about the expectation among those who are actively farming or did so, or many of us come from that past. Someone else in the room might reply that much of the leadership in many of the states, the 23-plus states that have introduced Glass-Steagall resolutions and other activities, are from that stratum around the country. Senator Harkin is from Iowa, and there are many other specific examples. So there's something, as someone said earlier, Helga, I think, a genetic quality in that, perhaps. And just as you would expect musicians should lead the charge for cultural renewal, but they don't, or physicians, I'm glad they're here, would lead the charge for health care for all, but it's the 5% across the board, and I think there's a tremendous response. And so I don't think there's any special agenda. It's all out, reach that 5%, and they are mobilizing. That's my personal experience, including from knowing some of the national leaders of some of the national organized farmer organizations or other similar commodity organizations in the country. It's person by person who's going to be responsible, and people are.
I think the question was basically, how can we bring this about? Is that in a nutshell? I'm a very strong advocate for collective bargaining in agriculture. And part of this presentation, the biggest part of it, was to show farmers that what you have can be very well attained right now. The farmers have been browbeat into the idea that they're producing something that nobody really wants or needs, and we don't really want or need you. And so with that mentality, it works very well to the buyers side. And we're saying that the farmer's got everything tipped in his favor right now to get parity prices. Now, the thing of it is that when you are advocating farmers get together that's in violation of the antitrust laws. So what we have, there was a law passed back in 1922 called the Capper-Volstead Act that gave farmers the legal right to get together for the purpose of marketing and bargaining and so on, provided that your organization, number one, is solely comprised of producers, and number two, and this is probably most important, that you cannot unduly enhance the price of your product by your action. But anyway, the organization that I belong to and advocate is the National Farmers Organization, NFO, and in order for that to happen, there's 4 guideline rules that you must go after. Number one, you got to organize, and basically that's kind of what I'm doing here a little bit today, and that's what we do with our house meetings, showing that presentation and so on. Number two is you got to be nationwide. The problem doesn't exist in one area, it exists all over the nation, and so you have to organize because your buyers are nationwide. So you got to be able to bargain with them effectively all over the nation. Number three is you got to deal in most all your major commodities. You can't just deal in one or two, because what happens, like if we would get the grain farmers all together and raise the price of grain up to parity, you'd bankrupt the cattlemen and you'd bankrupt the dairymen also. And so what you do is you try to bring them up in relative balance. And the fourth rule, last rule, is that once you make these gains, then you want to contract that ahead. You want to contract those gains ahead so you don't have a market that's going like this all the time. You have a stable market, and that is based on your cost of production plus a profit. So.
My name's Stephen J. Schrader. I'm from Southern California, and I'm relatively new to the LaRouche organization. I've been told that my religion is contrarianism, so matter of fact, in the Army I was a counterintelligence agent because they couldn't find a better job for me. Ma'am, I have some ideas for you might like. But my question today is that earlier with the talk of the economic policies and procedures and everything, what is the viewpoint and how we are addressing the moves to move the student loan programs of the country into the derivatives market of its own, with the apparent intent of turning all of our young college students into lifetime serfs to the banking industry?
Sure. It's clearly a debt farming policy. How would you know? Well, I could speak to that.
Okay.
I mean, I think the biggest factor is you've got, I think what Mr. LaRouche addressed, you've got youth right now that have no future. And one of the clearest aspects is that we've now accepted and tolerated not only a policy of indebting most Americans, but dumping, I think, an average of over $20,000 per college student in terms of debt. It's clearly a financial bubble. It's clearly a policy of genocide, and it's coming from the Queen and from the British policy. That's what this is. It's not, it didn't happen this way. It wasn't, oh, well, we didn't know. This is intending to suffocate and destroy the minds of the next generation. And I think the most important thing we've discussed is getting Glass-Steagall and getting this policy developed. I think it's an integrated part.
Okay.
Thanks for your
question.
question.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Good afternoon. Hi. My name is Jeremy Beck, and my question is for the panel in regards to positions and about industrial hemp, so non-narcotic industrial hemp. There have been several instances of bills being attached or amendments being attached to the Farm Bill, for example, to try and get that passed. So I'm interested in hearing some of the farmers or agriculture-related people's positions on how good that would be for us, and also their thoughts on the benefits that would actually provide not only to farming and agriculture and so forth, but also to the soil. My understanding is that hemp restores the soil, the nutrients to the soil. So I'd like to hear some responses about that.
Okay, well, if you can, take it up in the discussion process after this. Let me see if the panelists have anything to say on that particular? Of industrial hemp and the role of, is it like an alfalfa or something, I guess?
No, there's no gimmick here. We should have, Justus von Liebig in the 1800s worked on fertilization. We need basic science, and there's a lot of pull apart into this will do that and that will do that, and more selenium in the diet will help Africa and more. So I think we have to end the patenting of food seeds, the Monsanto syndrome, I call it, where Syngenta, for example, that's the current form of the ICI, Imperial Chemical Incorporated of England, and the old Sandoz Ciba-Geigy that made methadone to dope people for the war. We have to end that kind of thing. And so there's no one, we need proper fertilization and study on a scientific basis. You don't even need soil for very advanced agriculture. You could have a family farm on 1 acre and be growing your crops in eastern China or something with nuclear-powered desalinated seawater, and just have the crops on nutrient film or something. So that's the kind of chemistry and crop genetics and other science we need, and I would watch out for being whipsawed one way or another by a lot of apparent lesser things.
Say one thing regarding National Defense Acts. I think we should repeal the idea of indefinite detention and bring back farm price parity. That's a real national defense authorization. So next question.
Yes, hi, my name is Nikki Hensley. I've been in the Bay Area 2 years now. I'm new to the LaRouche PAC. And my question, I am from Kansas, southwest Kansas in particular. And one of my questions is because of the low parity that the farmers are getting, the biofuel thing has been very, very attractive to them. And how would I communicate, or how would we communicate to them that it's not a good idea? We know they have come to, the powers that be come to you and are offering you good money for your corn, but we need it, we need our fuel or our food supply. So how do we communicate that to them, that discourage them from selling their corn for biofuel?
Well, I think you tell them that it's a policy of genocide. You're killing off people. You're starving people to death. That's what's happening. There's more to say.
I hope you can talk to Frank more too, for the rest of the afternoon. But one thing is knowing hundreds and hundreds of farmers over the last 50 years or more in my life, 70 years, it's demoralization, because farmers were the first ones in the earlier time to want more nuclear power. We want these parity prices. We want decent farming for families and so forth. And then along comes the markets, global sourcing, World Trade Organization. You have to have risk management. You have to have puts and calls and forward selling. And the farmer figures this is the only way I'm going to survive because I'll never be able to get a price. I can't do what Frank Enders said. I can't do anything. It's hopeless. I just hope to be able to sell for a good price whatever corn I can produce next year. That's just demoralization. So let's try and remoralize as many people as we can, and it'll be enough.
Wait, don't leave. I have another question for you. You might as well stay up there. She keeps going. I feel bad. She keeps going back and forth. My question, because you were talking about water distribution and farming and all of that, is so important. What are your thoughts on the plans to destroy many of the dams that exist in the northern part of California and all over the country that the farmers are relying on for their cattle, their irrigation, their crops? Large amount of our, the population up in the northern part of Klamath and Siskiyou in the northern part of California has been devastated because of some of the policies and regulations, and now the water situation is becoming desperate. The water in the Central Valley has been turned off. So I just want your thoughts on the dam removals and the policies on water.
Again, Frank, and you can discuss in specific about Northern California, Oregon, and so forth. But one thing, let me add to that specifically, so that other people don't know. Let me give you 3 instances. In the Central Valley of California, which accounts for 60-70%, depending on the season, of certain kinds of fruits and vegetables of the national production, in March, farmers were said you can't have 100% of your federal water allocation. The maximum you can have is 20%. So thousands of acres, nothing is being grown, it's fallow, you're getting dust devils, and the reservoirs going down. This is a crisis. Eastern New Mexico, part of the cowboy country, they had a certain number of cattle. Gone. Counties are depopulating. Some of the farmers there that still have some water rights in the Pecos Upper Rio Grande Valley, they're selling them to the fracking companies because the water they have, it's very small, it isn't enough to farm a whole season. So they say the only way I can get by is I'll sell the rights this year for hydraulic fracturing. That's called a boom. This is the end of the line. Now, this dam removal on principle is part of the green genocide. 20, 30 years ago came the Worldwide Fund for Nature, World Wildlife Fund, Prince Philip and all these deadly aristocrat types. And they formed the American rivers, and they said the rivers should run free, get rid of levees and bring down dams. So a week ago in the Klamath River, there is a 1921 dam that started to be taken down. It needed refurbishing. It's full of silt, but instead of that comes the takedown of dams. We need to rehab the entire and upgrade, have more dams where we need them, get rid of the old dangerous ones. And that's what we need. And anything of the rest of this that you mentioned is absolutely deadly. It is part of the genocide agenda.
My name is Leni Rubinstein. I don't really have a question, but I have a comment, because this conference title is The Second American Revolution. And when I came to this country, one thing I learned was you have to think big, and you have to think about the whole world. And Helga LaRouche, in her speech, referred to the Declaration of Independence and the preamble to the American Constitution, that all men are created equal with certain inalienable rights, and one inalienable right is right to food, to eat every day, for health care, for every children to be able to use their mind. And I think that regarding, if you think back on the picture that Marcia showed of the hunger in the world, all these little things that might be big where you live concerning dams and all these problems, LaRouche pointed out this morning that Glass-Steagall, and we can have a second American revolution. I mean, we really have to think that this is a complete shift. I would like, for example, the farmers to think about, go really study the NAWAPA program and all the water that we are going to get. And what kind of food can we produce? What kind of schools should we set up? And invite people from Africa, Asia, and so forth in crash programs for farming. I mean, think about, Helga described traveling over this country. This is a gigantic country, and 2/3 of it, when you fly, there's nothing there. And I mean, the last hour, it's just gray because there's no water. So just, if you kind of think up here about all the food we could produce in America if we had the water, and then what everything else comes with it. It's a crime. It's the oligarchy now in charge. It's a crime that we have hunger in the world. That could have been solved many years ago, that not a single child would go hungry to bed. So I think we should think big. I would really like people to think about all the stuff we can do, and then get Glass-Steagall, and then we can get it done. And we really have a responsibility for the entire world in this nation. to get a thorough change. So all this stuff with the dams, the greenies, this is sick imperial oligarchical policies. And that is why we are here today, to conspire and go out and organize more people to conspire to get Glass-Steagall in now and get a complete shift. There's nothing we cannot do, and that is an American way of thinking. We can do anything we put our mind to doing.
So we'll take two more questions, and I want to let people know now, and then I'll repeat it once we're done. We were going to extend the lunch till about 2:15. We will, once we begin the selections from box B minor mass, which you are not going to want to miss, the doors will be closed. You will not be able to enter until the music is over. So I ask people to come back promptly from lunch at 2:15. Next question.
Hi, my name is Patrick. I'm from San Jose. I was wondering what your thoughts were on vertical gardens, on restructuring the whole city's infrastructure to actually incorporate gardens and planting actual food throughout the whole community. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, one thing, think of the North American Water and Power Alliance. Think of the scale of water we need, the scale of water we did in the 30s with the Colorado Basin, the Columbia Basin. I don't mention the TVA, they have a lot of rainfall, but I'm just kidding. But the point is, that's the scale you want to think about, because it presumes millions of jobs and whole new repopulation of parts of the Farm Belt and new towns and population of Canada that's so underpopulated. It's a scandal. And so think of new towns as well as reinvigorating old towns that are being destroyed, like Detroit, that would be, once again, part of a reinvigorated Great Lakes industrial giant, to provide the fixtures, the machinery, the pipe, this kind of thing to go into Nawapa. From that point of view, we could have wonderful city designs again. But otherwise, and science centers, as the former question raised, we could be dealing with, if we didn't have the Monsanto syndrome, we would be dealing with increasing photosynthesis. Allowing rice, for example, to be more, to make a leap ahead in photosynthesis. It's called a C4 instead of a C3 plant. So look at things like that, because otherwise you're stuck with how to adjust to the current dying regime. Because think of designing new cities or rehabilitating cities, in which case you want places to grow things, you want rings around it of productive farmland, this kind of thing. No global sourcing. You have to think of the crisis point we're at and what we can have in the future instead of any lesser matter of interest.
Thank you.
This question is for Helga on a subject that I think you're very familiar with. We talk about the next American Revolution, but as we all know, the dumbing down of the American population has been an ongoing policy in the post-war era. And you can look at the sophistry that's taught in the educational system, largely stemming back to a British influence that can be traced to like the Rhodes Scholarship and people around that circle in England. But then there's also the chemical poisoning of our people and the policy of fluoridation of the water, for example, that was done by Nazis in the concentration camps, and this poisoning that we talk about now going on through even with our food supplies. And as you know, the Nazis are not the architects of the eugenics programs. That's a British policy, Anglo-American policy that the German Nazis adopt and expand upon. How much do you think this eugenics policy ideology of the British is the origin of the dumbing down of the American population now, whether it be through the school systems and the chemical industry and whatnot?
Well, I think that the American The problem with America is that, the undermining of the American Revolution, which, I'm always trying to tell people in Europe and elsewhere that you have two fundamentally different American traditions. You have the tradition of the American Revolution, which was, reinstituted many times, and the British tried to subvert it with the War of 1812, with the Civil War, and when they realized they could not reconquer the American colonies through military means, they started to subvert it by openly saying we have to get the American establishment to accept the British model of empire, and then on the basis of the Anglo-American special relationship, run the world as an empire. And that was promoted by the different groups around H.G. Wells, who wrote this book in 1929 about the open conspiracy. And I think a lot of policies which nowadays are attributed to America are really coming from the idea that a part of the establishment has accepted the idea that the United States should be part of this Anglo-American empire. And I think that a lot of the policies, including the promotion of drugs, the MK Ultra policies in the 60s, various of these things, are really part of the idea that you have to dumb the population down, that you have to destroy the cognitive abilities, and that's the only way how you can run it. So I think that that's why we put so absolutely unbelievably much importance on the question of classical culture. I mean, right now, I think even if you leave alone the financial collapse, the possibility that the financial system could blow out any minute in a supernova evaporation, even if you leave out the question of the potential extinction of civilization through a thermonuclear war, which we are also on the verge of. I mean, we were close to World War III 5, 6, 7 weeks ago when Israel attacked militarily Damascus. I mean, this could have gone into a nuclear confrontation between two nuclear powers, Israel and Russia. But even if you leave all of this away, if you just keep the culture as it is right now, if you look at the children and teenagers, the drug culture, the discos, the crimes, the ghetto crime, which is a result of the unemployment. I mean, I think that if you are afraid of your own children, if children are getting up and become running amok in your school because they have been brought up on Pokemon first and then violent video games as the second drug following Pokemon, which should not be underestimated. And then you have 12-year-olds who rape 11-year-olds, film that, put it as a snuff movie, on the schoolyard to send it, look at it, not at the teacher anymore, but looking at the pornography they made themselves. I mean, this is going on in the schools. This is going on in many parts of Europe as well. If you leave the culture like that, then these children who already are scary will grow up to be monsters. So my horror vision is, if we leave the culture as it is, we will plunge into a dark age of possibly no return because all the cognitive powers have been destroyed. And this is why, we have to have an absolute new paradigm of, Lynn has initiated this many years ago and he has reinitiated it about 12 years ago, the idea that we have to have young people who really own scientific and artistic principles, who basically know how to compose. I mean, Lynn was talking earlier this morning about why the idea that you can attribute knowledge from sense perception is a completely wrong idea. Yet, if you talk to people, everybody says, no, I know, my experience tells me that such and such is the case. And you find the idea that people rely on their sense perception is extremely common. And the reason why we only talk about 5%, Marsha was saying, let's not worry about, interest groups. It is the 5% across the board of people who even are capable of thinking. What we have to do if we want to have a second American Revolution, it has to be like the American Revolution of the Founding Fathers, of people who were associated with Benjamin Franklin, who was a scientist and who was in contact with all the top scientists and Republican forces in Europe. And it has to be based on rekindling a renaissance where people reject this popular culture. They reject all the drugs, all the mind-altering substances which are used by the imperial forces to keep people dumb. And the only way is that people have to start really understanding what are the principles of great classical composition, what are the faculties of the mind, how you can make a new invention. The idea that we are at the end of history and that everything has been discovered already is such an idiotic idea. Mankind is only around for 7 million years. Now, in the history of the universe, this is just this moment, we popped here. Written history is only 200 years. It's 200 generations covering about 3,500 years. 200 generations is almost, like yesterday. So let's assume that we get out of this crisis and we can create a new paradigm more worthy of civilization and the dignity of mankind. Then we can easily think, how should mankind look in 1,000 years from now? So, when you go back to the Stone Age, people were murdering each other with a stone of the size of a handy. But they thought it was a stone. Now, nowadays, people say, oh, I have a handy, which is a super top computer. I can have live conferences with people all over the world, and it's like being in one room. I can even conduct warfare with a little machine in my hand. So people think that this is progress. Now just think 1,000 years from now, people will look back at us and say, oh, there were these people with their mobile telephones, and they thought they have everything in their power already. And they were speculating all day on the internet with, virtual money, which then in July or so, latest September 2013, turned all to be nothing because Glass-Steagall was implemented, and then a new age started, and from that on, people became spacefaring people again, and we could think of a world where every child would be so inspired to become creative, to learn an instrument, to write poetry, to write beautiful dramas for visions of the future. We have a world in front of us, and I think the worst damage which has been done by the empire is that it has stolen the power of imagination for us. We cannot imagine anymore. Everything has become so, children don't play anymore. I'm lucky, I still played. I constructed little farms and put my animals in there, and I had all kinds of plans, or we would play. There's this famous Karl May, who was a German author who wrote many beautiful books about the Red Indians and whatnot. So I would be Winnetou, and my friends would be Old Shatterhand, and we would have all these games. We had beautiful games. I'm coming from Trier, which is the oldest city in Germany. It's more than 2,000 years old, and when they did excavations around the channel of the river, the Mosel, they found out all these coins from the Roman Empire and other little things. So we would dig and made fantasy stories about that period of the Roman Empire. So we had an extremely rich fantasy life or imagination as children. And when I look at what the children do today with these stupid, play machines and so I think that the worst thing which has happened is that this present culture has stolen the power of imagination. And, if you cannot imagine a beautiful future, like a poet like Friedrich Schiller, he would say, be the servant. Be not the servant of your century. Live for your century, but not be the servant. Have a vision of the future. And, we have to go back to a situation where people say, no, wait a second, this present world stinks completely, and I don't like it. And I'm going to study the great artists of the past, and out of that we will make a vision of how the future should be. And I fully agree, we should build many new cities. This Navapa project, which will turn the desert strip east of the Rocky Mountains into a lush agricultural area with new forests, with new weather systems. We should build new cities which are beautiful. Cities don't have to look like Houston. No offense, but we should have. For example, we should. I wanted once to build a Cusanus city based on the principle of unity in multitude, where you take one aesthetic conceptions and you play, what are the exhausting options or what are the options in whatever poetical idea you have as an architect for a new city. And you could take beautiful architectonical examples from the past. Why can we not, with modern technology and equipment, build beautiful cities, taking the most beautiful architectural examples of all cultures? The United States is a melting pot. You could have beautiful cities where you have Chinese temples, Indian palaces, with modern means. And it could still be all very functional based on, Nukem systems, Nuplex systems. You could have integration of culture, opera. In the outskirts, you could have industries. All the infrastructure would be underground in a modular system, so that cities could become beautiful and managed and become centers of urban life. And you could have a renaissance in the United States. The second American Revolution would mean that the United States becomes a fountain of, literacy, of, people becoming science engineers, of astronauts, of composers. Right now, people are not on the full potential they could be. And to fulfill this, you have to have the same absolute aspiration like the founding fathers had to build a republic. And I think we only will succeed if you develop the passionate love for America and what it was and what it must become. And I can only tell you the whole world looks at that. They have lost very much the hope that it can be done, but I tell you, if there is a motion, everything will fall into place. If the United States goes for Glass-Steagall, I tell you, you have no idea. Right now, the United States is hated, and every drone which is fired causes 100 new terrorists, so that is a totally wrong policy. But if the United States would say, okay, we do Glass-Steagall, we end the casino economy, and we enter the kind of cooperation among nations, which the World Land Bridge, the Bering Strait, Navapa, all of these projects enable, I tell you, the whole world would love this country, because the memory would come back about the greatness of America. And, I think you have so much on your shoulder and in your potential that if you really think it through, I know you will be so inspired to go out and multiply and make sure that we really can pull this off. It's the only chance mankind has, but I'm absolutely confident that, once you have this dream again what America should be, we can do a miracle.